everyone, welcome to my painting table. It's nice to paint with you again. We'll be working on the sheep and the shepherd in this video, and so get your stuff ready to start painting the sheep first. We'll be working on these 3 different sheep, and they're basically all the same. I'll be focusing my attention on one of them, and you can use the same techniques to paint the rest. Let's start by transferring the face and ear with gray graphite. Okay, now we'll do some floating, so you'll need olive branch on your palette, and we'll be using our number 12 flat. I wanted to show you that I keep a little dish next to my palette containing flow medium, and this is really helpful when floating. When I'm floating, I dip my brush in this and wipe it off on the sides, and this is the moisture I use for my floats. Let's start by floating the edge of the sheep. While this right side is drying, I'll reinforce the left side, just the corner. And then I'll move on to the rest of the sheep and do the same thing. So very tenderly go in with your paint and add a little touch to each of the corners. This will reinforce and deepen the color there. Now that we've shaded our sheep, let's map out with a chalk pencil where we want our spots. Use your photos as a guide and randomly draw in where you would like the spots. To dry brush the spots, you'll need warm white on your palette and the number 6 oval dry brush. So load your brush with the warm white and take some out on your paper towel. And then move to your piece and work over those areas that we had just chalked in. Concentrate the brightest area of the spot right in the center. Okay, once you have the spots roughed in, return and brighten up the very center of each spot. You're just lightly touching each spot, like so. After you've brightened up the spots, return with your brush and lightly dry brush in a circular motion around each spot. This will make the spot larger and softer on the edges. Next, add carbon black to your palette so we can base coat the faces and ears and add all the scrolled details. Before we start lining, let's set the detail on our sheep with the clear glazing medium. Now make sure all the scrolled details are transferred on your sheep, and then with the liner brush and carbon black, line those in. If you use straight carbon black in lining these details, the lines will be very harsh and dark, To soften the lines, add flow medium. And then kind of a neat effect is to use the straight carbon black for the tips of the details. Just the tips. Alright, now we have all the detail lines on, and the end of each line has a little comma stroke of just black. Makes for a nice effect. Once all your lines are dry, we'll be using crackle medium over our sheep. Get ready for the fun. We're looking to create the same effect that we achieved on our star. Carefully apply the medium to each sheep. And remember, the more medium you have, or the thicker it is, the wider the crack. And do your best to stay just on the sheep. This is just for the sheep. Okay, let that dry and let the crackling begin. So are your sheep dry? Have they crackled? Look at the beautiful crackling here. I love it. Okay, well, one last thing before we put our sheep aside. Around this particular sheep here, I'd like to put some shading with the raw umber color. So if you feel the same way about yours, put some raw umber on your palette and grab your number 12 flat. I want to add just a light layer of raw umber, so I'm bringing down the color a little bit on my palette. That's what I wanted, just a real light shadow behind the sheep there. In order to add the various dots to our sheep, let's put some more warm white on our palette along with flow medium at a 1:1 ratio. I'm using a stylus to create the dots, and I'm just dipping and then dotting. The dots are random and in various sizes. These lovely sheep are done for now until we're ready to splatter them. In the meantime, let's get out our shepherd. The shepherd is on the table now, and we'll be dry brushing his robe with corn flour. And you'll also need your number 8 oval dry brush. Removing some of the paint. I'll start out on the sleeve. You want to leave some of this area up here dark. That's your shadow. Moving over to the other sleeve. And the robe. Now to brighten our highlights, we're adding warm white to our palette and mixing that with our corn flour at a 1:1 ratio. In mixing those two colors together, you should end up with a lighter blue, somewhat like this. And we'll brighten our highlights, starting again on the sleeve. And then over to the other sleeve. And the chest. And continue down to the bottom of the robe. It's not going to be perfect, but try to get the dry brushing as even as you can. In order to dry brush highlights on our face and hands, we need the Mold Rose mix, which is Mold Rose and warm white mixed at a 1:1 ratio. Also, we need our smaller number 6 oval dry brush. I've swirled the color out of my brush on a paper towel, and I'm starting in the center area of the face and then moving out from there. The brightest of the highlight should be right around where the nose would be. Okay, moving down to the hands. And then let's also add a small highlight on the neck area. Now to brighten up the highlight, I'm adding a touch of warm white to the center of his face. Let's also brighten up the other highlights. Alright, now to set the work on our face and hands, we need to add a coat of clear glazing medium. We'll be shading the face and hands next with the brown earth and olive branch mix. I'm mixing these two colors at a 1:1 ratio to get a warm brown. For shading the face and hands, I'll be using my number 12 flat along with a hint of flow medium. I am starting in the headband area and pulling the float down the left side of the face, like so. And then I'll do the same on the right side. And then now for the neck area. And now the hands. Okay, now to add rosiness to the skin, add a small amount of rose pink to your palette. And you probably already guessed it, we're using our number 6 oval dry brush. We'll start at the cheeks. We just need a small amount in the bottom left hand corner and the bottom right hand corner. And then the same thing, a small amount on each hand. I tend to like to go back and brighten up the highlights on the face after all the shading and cheeks are done. So get out your Mold Rose and Warm White and put a bit of each on your palette. I like to soften the cheeks a bit with this color so they're not so pronounced. Okay, if you need a little more on your hands, you can do that now too. All right. How about we dry brush the highlights on the headdress next? So put a little husk on your palette and get out your number 8 oval dry brush. I'm ready to go right to my headdress and start highlighting. Right here, the brightest part of the highlight would be right against the edge. And now let's streak the highlight down the headdress like so. And then moving over, same thing. I'm leaving a section without any highlighting there, so it looks like the fold in the fabric. And now the top of the head. We also need to highlight the sides. Now add a bit of warm white to your dirty brush and wipe that off on a paper towel. We're brightening up the highlights just a bit more. It's very soft and subtle. And make sure and get your sides. That should do it. Let's touch up the base coat on our headband with pine green and base coat the beard with raw umber. Since we're working on the headdress, we might as well finish up on the headband. So cut yourself a small piece of mesh drywall tape for stenciling. To do the stenciling, you'll need moss green on your palette and the number 6 oval dry brush. Lay down your drywall tape at a slight angle, like so, and press in place. Prepare your brush just like you would for dry brushing. You want to take some of the color out on your paper towel. Now as you're stenciling, you don't want to have any color leak down into the other parts of the design. We want to stay just on the headband. Lightly pull the color across the headband area over the stencil. As you're doing this, carefully try and get right up to the edge of the headband with this stencil. Now do the same thing on the other side. Well, we have the headband stenciled and we're ready to move on to a little bit of shading on the headdress. Okay, take a moment and treat the headdress with clear glazing medium, even the sides, and then put a drop of raw umber on your palette. We'll be shading the headdress with the raw umber and our number 12 flat. Starting at the top, we'll shade right next to the headband. And now let's shade in this crease here. I'm bringing it up from the bottom and working on the right side right now. And then flip your brush over and work on the other side. Little short strokes. And then take your mop brush and pat over that. Okay, now the corner, right there. And then the back end. Put a drop of olive branch on your palette and we'll highlight the beard. We'll need our number 6 oval dry brush. And you just need a little bit right here on the left side. Once everything is dry, use some white graphite to transfer the stripes on the robe and the detail on the beard. Okay, all the stripes on the robe have been transferred, including the lines on the beard, and now I would like to straighten them out. It helps me line better. I don't transfer straight lines very well, so I'm using my clear ruler and my chalk pencil to straighten my lines out. Alright, now with your line straight, you'll need to have storm blue on your palette and your liner brush, and then we'll get started. Okay, we'll start out with the wider dark blue stripes, and I want a dry brushed look. So you start out with a damp liner brush, load your brush with paint, and then wipe some of the color out on a paper towel. Flatten your brush against the surface and then just pull. Try to keep the pressure the same all the way down. And it's every other line. So flatten out your brush and then pull using the same pressure. So when you pull your line, you flatten out your brush like so, and then pull the line using the same pressure so you have the same thickness as you come down with that line. The trouble I run into with pulling a line this long is that my line will get thicker and thicker, so I have to focus on not pressing too hard as I move down. Okay, now with our last thick line, now to create the thin lines, we'll want warm white and cornflower blue on our palette. And you can mix those at a 1-to-1 ratio. And we'll come up with our light blue color, and you can go ahead and use your same liner brush. You'll just use less pressure this time. I think the easiest place to start is on this small sleeve. You can get the feel for how your brush is moving along on the surface, and if you need to do any corrections. So I'm loading my brush and wiping out some of the color on a paper towel. I'm using a thinner line now, so I need less pressure. And again, this is every other line. The key to getting this dry brush look, it's a little tricky, but I found that if I really load my brush well and then wipe it off on a paper towel, then my brush will be nice and full of paint, but evenly dispersed. So less pressure. Try to carry it as far as you can. So there's enough paint evenly dispersed on my brush. I'm using less pressure and I'm carrying it down. And then there's a small skinny little line on the edge here. Make sure to add the stripes to the sides of your piece too. Don't forget the sides. To set our work, we need to add glazing medium, but before we do, make sure there's no lines or anything left. Use an eraser and erase any of those graphite lines. Okay, I have the glazing medium. Just add a quick thin coat and let that dry. And that will set all your nice lines that you work so hard to achieve. The glazing medium is dry and I'm ready now to do my floating. I'm using the number 12 flat and the Storm Blue. And I'll start by working underneath the headdress here. Let's go over to the left here and work on this sleeve. Okay, now this area right next to the headdress, coming down from the beard. And now down this section to separate the sleeve and the robe. And along the top of the hand there. And then under the sleeve and the hand. Okay, along the bottom. And make sure to catch the sides with all your floats. And the last place to float is right up here along the neckline. We'll be working on the large stripes at the bottom of the sleeves and the trim around his neck. So you'll need marigold on your palette, your number 12 flat, and a liner. Wet your liner brush and pat it on a paper towel. Load it with some paint and then also wipe that on the paper towel a bit. Once you've removed some of the paint off the brush, go over to the sleeve and we'll work across the sleeve like so. We will need a few coats for sure. Okay, pull it again with their second coat. I like a little bit of the blue showing through, like you can see here. So I'm not going to fix that. I'm going to leave that the way it is. Also line the trim up against the neck with the same color. Now to mix the color for the stitches and the line work on the sleeves and the highlight up on the trim, you need to add warm white to your marigold, and it's just a 1-to-1 mix. In highlighting the trim, start in the center and then pull your stroke up and off the surface. Now add a touch of warm white to your mix and brighten your highlight even more. Start in the center. Now use your mix to line the sleeves. We'll start at the bottom here. So make sure to paint all these little stitches going in this direction. Leave a little space in between each stitch, and then go back and pull strokes in the opposite direction. And this creates your blanket stitch. Don't forget to do the sides also. Okay, here we've got it all done, all the little stitches on the sides and the edges. And I can see I would like to add a little more warm white to my highlight here on the trim. So I'm just going to add a little touch right there at the bottom of the trim. Brighten that up. Now let's line the beard, and we'll start with just the marigold and stroke each of the lines. To add some highlights to his beard, use the highlight mix that you used on the robe. It's just a little bit of warm white added to your marigold. And then I'd like to go back to the top line and reline it. I'm using straight marigold here. Just another coat. Okay, that should do it with our painting on the shepherd and the sheep. We still have the staff yet to do, but that will be at the very end. Next up are the 3 kings.